The abandoned Kepler research station hung in space like a metal corpse, its hull scarred by decades of micrometeorite impacts and solar radiation. What had once been humanity's most ambitious deep space laboratory now drifted silent and forgotten, another casualty of the colonial wars that had reshaped the galaxy. Nyx pressed her palm against the station's outer airlock, feeling the vibration of dying life support systems through her gloves, her bioluminescent markings the pale blue tracery that ran along her temples, and down her neck pulsed with anxiety. Beside her, Vera's own markings flickered in sympathetic response, though the younger woman's patterns were still developing, showing her youth among their kind. The medical bay should be in Section C, Nyx whispered, her voice barely audible through the calm system. If there's anything left. Vera nodded, adjusting the salvaged breathing apparatus that covered the lower half of her face. At 19, she was tall for their species, nearly matching her mother's height. But where Nyx's movements were measured and careful, Vera's held the restless energy of youth. The crystalline growths along her shoulders, their people's equivalent of coming-of-age markers, had only recently finished forming. They moved through the station's corridors like ghosts, their mag boots clicking softly against the metal deck plates. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly red glow, and the air recyclers wheezed with mechanical distress. This place had been abandoned for good reason. Why did humans build so many of these stations just to leave them? Vera asked, running her fingers along a wall panel covered in dead screens. Fear, Nyx replied simply. When the colonies started fighting each other, places like this became targets. Too dangerous to stay, too expensive to move. She paused at an intersection, checking the faded directional signs. Your people and mine weren't the only ones who lost everything in those wars. The medical bay doors stood partially open, jammed by some long-ago power failure. Nyx squeezed through first, her lithe form easily navigating the narrow gap. Their species had evolved on a high-gravity world, making them naturally compact and strong, but it also meant they could slip through spaces that would challenge most humans. Inside, the medical bay was a treasure trove of abandoned equipment. Surgical bays lined the walls, their robotic arms frozen in mid-procedure. Cabinets full of supplies stood untouched, protected by the station's sterile environment. But it was the pharmaceutical storage unit that drew Nyx's attention. A sealed chamber at the far end of the room. Is it still powered? Vera asked, joining her mother at the storage unit's control panel. Backup systems only. Nyx began working at the access codes, her fingers dancing over the human-designed interface. After years of scavenging, she'd learned to read their symbols, their logic patterns. But it might be enough. The storage unit's lights flickered to life, and inside, rows of medical supplies gleamed like jewels. Vera gasped, her markings flaring bright with excitement. There were pain suppressors, antibiotics, cellular regenerators, everything they needed to treat the wasting sickness that had been slowly killing their people since the evacuation from their home world. Mother, look at all of this, Vera breathed, pressing her face to the transparent aluminum window. We could save everyone. Nyx allowed herself a moment of hope as she began the extraction sequence. The storage unit hummed as it prepared to release its contents, but then something went wrong. Warning lights began flashing, and an automated voice filled the room. Security breach detected. Initiating containment protocol. The floor beneath their feet suddenly hummed with energy, and before either woman could react, walls of crackling blue force sprang up around them. The containment field formed a perfect cube, 6 meters on each side, trapping them in the center of the medical bay. What? Vera stumbled backward, her hand passing through the energy barrier only to be repelled with a sharp shock. Mother. Nyx tried the walls of their prison, feeling the tingle of the force field against her skin. Her bioluminescent markings pulsed rapidly now, betraying her fear. It's an old security system. Must have been triggered when we accessed the storage unit. The automated voice continued its mechanical recitation. Unauthorized personnel detected. Initiating sterilization. Protocol in 10 minutes. Please remain calm. Vera's eyes went wide. Sterilization protocol? They were afraid of contamination, Nyx explained grimly, still searching for any weakness in the energy field. Anyone who broke into the medical supplies would be. She didn't finish the sentence. They tried everything, pushing against the barriers, looking for control panels, calling out in case the system could hear them. But the energy field held firm, and the countdown continued its relentless progression. 8 minutes, 7, 6, I'm sorry, Nyx whispered, pulling her daughter close. I should have been more careful, should have studied the security systems first. Vera leaned into her mother's embrace, her own markings now pulsing in synchronization. With Nyx as a biological comfort response their species had evolved over millions of years. You were trying to save everyone. That's what makes you a good leader. A good leader doesn't get her daughter killed. They held each other tighter as the countdown reached 3 minutes. The medical bay's lighting had shifted to an ominous yellow, and new panels were sliding open in the ceiling, sterilization emitters that would flood the containment field with lethal radiation. That's when they heard the footsteps. Heavy boots on metal decking, moving with purpose through the corridors. Both women looked up, hope and fear warring in their expressions. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until a figure appeared in the medical bay's doorway. He was human, clearly, though unlike any Nyx had seen before. Tall and lean, with dark hair that hung past his shoulders and skin marked by years of exposure to harsh environments. His clothes were a patchwork of salvaged materials, a thermal vest over a ship's duty uniform. Boots that had been repaired so many times they were more patched than original leather. A tool belt hung around his waist, heavy with devices Nyx couldn't identify. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were deep brown, almost black, and they held the weight of someone who had seen too much loss when he spotted them. In the containment field, those eyes widened with something that might have been recognition. 2 minutes to sterilization cycle, the automated voice announced cheerfully. The human, he couldn't be more than 30. Nyx estimated rushed to a control panel near the storage unit. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, fingers flying over the interface as he muttered under his breath. Come on, you piece of salvage, he growled, his voice rough with disuse. I know you've got manual overrides somewhere. Vera pressed against the energy barrier, watching him work. Can you understand us? She called out in accented standard. He glanced up, surprised. You speak standard, some. Please the field, working on it. He pulled a device from his belt, something that looked like a modified scanner, and began running it over the control panel. These old Kepler stations all use the same security matrix. Just need to find the right frequency. 1 minute remaining. Nyx felt Vera's hand slip into hers, their fingers intertwining as they had when Vera was small and afraid of the dark. Their markings had synchronized completely now, pulsing in slow, steady waves that spoke of acceptance, of love in the face of death. The human's device began beeping rapidly. Got it, he breathed, then looked up at them with something like determination. When this field drops, run. Don't stop, don't look back. Follow the corridor to Section B. Take the maintenance shaft down to Level 3. There's an emergency shelter there. What about you? Nyx asked. I'll be right behind you. The sterilization emitters in the ceiling began to glow, building toward lethal intensity. The countdown reached 10 seconds. The human's fingers stabbed at the control panel one final time. The energy field flickered and died. Run. Nyx grabbed Vera's hand and sprinted for the doorway, her daughter keeping pace beside her. Behind them, she could hear the human following, his boots ringing against the deck plates as the medical bay filled with deadly light. They ran through corridors that blurred together in their panic, following his shouted directions until they reached a maintenance shaft that led down into the station's depths. Vera went first, then Nyx, with the human bringing up the rear just as the sterilization cycle reached full power above them. In the emergency shelter 3 levels down, surrounded by the comforting hum of functional life support, they finally stopped running. The human sealed the entrance behind them and leaned against it, breathing hard. That was closer than I like, he said, then looked at them with curiosity replacing the urgency in his eyes. I'm Jace. By the way, and you too. Just made this the most interesting day I've had in about 3 years. Nyx studied him carefully, her markings now pulsing with cautious hope rather than fear. This human had risked his life to save them strangers from a species many of his kind viewed with suspicion at best. "I am Nix," she said formally. "This is my daughter, Vera. We owe you our lives." Jace waved off her gratitude, but she could see he was pleased by it. "What were you doing in the medical bay?" "That storage unit's been locked down since the evacuation. Our people are sick," Vera said quietly. "We need the medicines." Something shifted in Jace's expression, a softening around his eyes that spoke of understanding. "Sick how?" Nix hesitated. Trust was not something her people gave easily, especially to humans, but this man had just saved their lives, and Vera's markings were already responding to his presence with the pale gold flickers that indicated acceptance. "A wasting disease," she said finally. "It began after we fled our home world. Our physicians think it's caused by exposure to radiation during the evacuation, but we lack the resources to treat it properly." "How many?" "Nearly 2,000 souls." Jace was quiet for a long moment, and Nix found herself studying his face, trying to read the emotions that flickered across it. When he looked up at them again, his eyes held a determination that reminded her of the moment he'd freed them from the containment field. "Well," he said, settling back against the shelter wall, "looks like we've got some work to do." The emergency shelter was smaller than Nix had first realized, barely 3 meters square, with curved walls that spoke of hurried construction. Emergency rations lined one wall in neat rows, while a small fusion heater provided warmth and light. It was clearly meant for short-term survival, not extended habitation. Jace moved with the efficiency of someone long accustomed to solitude, checking the air recyclers and adjusting the temperature controls. His movements were graceful despite his size, and Nix found herself watching the way his hands moved over the familiar controls. "How long have you been here?" Vera asked, settling onto one of the emergency cots with visible relief. The adrenaline from their escape was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. 3 years, give or take," Jace replied, not looking up from the control panel. "Maybe 4. Time gets fuzzy out here." He paused, glancing at them over his shoulder. "Station's been my home since the Meridian conflict ended." Nix recognized the careful neutrality in his voice, the tone of someone who had lost everything and didn't want to talk about it. She understood that feeling intimately. "You live here alone?" she asked. Seemed safer that way. He turned to face them fully, and she could see him taking in their appearance more carefully now that they weren't running for their lives. His gaze lingered on their bioluminescent markings, but not with the disgust or fear she'd grown accustomed to from humans. Instead, there was something that looked almost like wonder. Vera shifted uncomfortably on the cot, and Nix noticed her daughter's markings had dimmed considerably. The younger woman was trying to hide it, but exhaustion and stress were taking their toll. "Vera," Nix moved to her daughter's side, placing a hand on her forehead. The skin was warm to warm. "You're running a fever." "I'm fine," Vera protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Jace approached them cautiously, his dark eyes showing concern. "Is it the sickness you mentioned?" Nix nodded grimly. "It progresses slowly, but the stress of today," she trailed off, worry evident in the rapid pulsing of her markings. "I have medical supplies," Jace said quietly. "Not much, but some basic treatments, fever reducers, pain suppressors." He moved to a storage locker and began pulling out items: a portable medical scanner, various pharmaceutical patches, bottles of clear liquid that looked like for fluids. All of it was clearly scavenged, but well maintained. "You know medical treatment?" Nix asked, surprised. "Picked it up." He shrugged, but there was something careful in his voice again. "Out here, you learn fast or you don't learn at all." He approached Vera with the scanner, then hesitated. "May I?" The question was directed at both of them. Nix realized he was asking permission, showing respect for their autonomy in a way that was surprisingly rare among the humans she'd encountered. Vera nodded weakly, and Jace ran the scanner over her, frowning at the readouts: elevated temperature, some cellular inflammation, but nothing immediately life-threatening. This should help. He handed her a patch that would absorb through the skin, along with a bottle of electrolyte solution. His movements were gentle, professional, and Nix found herself reevaluating her assumptions about this strange human who lived alone among the stars. "Thank you," Vera murmured, already looking more comfortable as the fever reducer took effect. Jace settled back against the opposite wall, maintaining a respectful distance. So tell me about your people. Are you refugees? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Nyx felt Vera's hand slip into hers, a gesture of support and solidarity. That didn't go unnoticed by their host. We were the keepers of Zephyria Prime, Nyx said finally. A peaceful world, rich in rare minerals. When the colonial wars reached our system, she paused. The memory's still sharp after all these years. The human factions couldn't agree on who should control the mining rights, so they decided to make sure no one could have them. Jace's expression darkened. Scorched earth, quite literally. The bitterness in Nyx's voice was unmistakable. We managed to evacuate most of our people before the bombardment, but the ships were overcrowded, poorly shielded. The radiation exposure during the flight is what's killing us now, and you've been wandering ever since, looking for a new home, somewhere that will accept us. She met his eyes directly. Most worlds won't. We're a reminder of what humans did to each other during the wars. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, Jace spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I was there. Both women looked at him sharply, not at Zephyria. He continued quickly, but I was part of the colonial defense force, fought in 17 different systems before I realized what we were really doing. His hands clenched into fists. Wasn't defending anyone, just helping rich corporations fight over resources while entire civilizations burned. Why did you stop? Vera asked softly. Because I watched a medical station get vaporized. 18,000 patients and staff, gone in an instant. All because it was treating refugees from the wrong side. He looked up at them, and Nyx could see the weight of guilt in his eyes. I couldn't be part of that anymore. Understanding passed between them, the recognition of shared trauma, of lives torn apart by forces beyond their control. Nyx felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the defensive walls she'd built around her heart. Is that why you saved us? She asked. I saved you because leaving you to die would have made me the same as the people I ran from. He paused, considering his words. But I stayed to help because you remind me of what I should have been fighting for all along. The shelter's recycled air carried the faint scent of their different biologies, the ozone smell of their bioluminescent processes mixing with Jace's more familiar human scent. It should have been strange, alien, but somehow it felt comfortable. The medical supplies in the storage unit, Nyx said eventually. Is there another way to access them? Jace nodded slowly. The security system reset after the sterilization cycle. I can probably hack it again, but it'll take time. And we'll need to be more careful. We have time, Vera said, her voice stronger now that the fever had broken. Our ship isn't expecting us back for several days. Your ship, a small transport, Nyx explained. We're part of a scouting group, looking for supplies and potential settlement sites. The main fleet is hidden in the asteroid belt, waiting for our return. 2,000 people, Jace murmured, as if testing the number on his tongue. All sick, not all. But many, the children especially. Nyx's markings pulsed with pain at the memory. They're the most vulnerable to the radiation effects. Something hardened in Jace's expression, a resolve that reminded Nyx of the moment he'd chosen to save them from the containment field. Then we'll get those supplies, he said firmly. All of them. It's dangerous, Vera protested. You've already done enough, have I? He looked between them. And Nyx saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip, a longing that spoke of years spent alone, of a man who had forgotten what it meant to have a purpose beyond mere survival. When's the last time I did something that actually mattered? Nyx felt Vera's hand squeeze hers, and she realized her daughter was thinking the same thing she was, that this human, this broken soldier turned hermit, might be exactly what their people needed, not just for his help accessing the medical supplies, but as proof that not all humans were their enemies. You don't know us, Nyx said carefully. Don't know if we can be trusted. You're here risking your lives to save your people, Jace replied. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. The heater hummed softly in the corner, casting dancing shadows on the curved walls. Outside, the station's hull creaked with the endless thermal expansion and contraction of deep space. But inside their small shelter, something new was taking root. "There's something else," Vera said quietly. "Something we haven't told you." Nix looked at her daughter sharply, but Vera continued. "Our people. We bond differently than humans. Deeper connections, based on bioluminescent resonance. It's part of how we survived as a species. On a dangerous world." She glanced at her mother, then back at Jace. "Your presence here, your kindness, it's affecting us in ways you might not understand." Jace frowned. "Affecting you how?" Nix felt heat rise in her cheeks, a very human gesture her people had never needed before their exile. "Our markings respond to emotional stimuli. Strong feelings can create sympathetic resonance with others nearby." "I don't understand." "Look at us," Vera said simply. Jace's eyes widened as he noticed what they meant. Their bioluminescent markings, which had been pulsing independently since they'd met him, were now synchronized not just with each other, but responding to his presence in subtle ways. When he moved, their patterns shifted. When he spoke, gentle waves of light rippled across their skin. "Does it hurt?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "No," Nix said softly. "It's actually pleasant, comforting, but it means we're beginning to form a connection with you, whether we intend to or not. And that's bad, not bad," Vera said quickly, "but significant. Our people don't form casual bonds. When the resonance begins, it usually means something deeper is developing." Jace was quiet for a long moment, studying their synchronized patterns with fascination rather than fear. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I haven't felt connected to anyone in years." The admission hung in the air between them, vulnerable and honest. Nix felt her markings pulse brighter in response to the longing in his voice, and she saw Vera's do the same. "You should know," Nix said carefully, "that bonds formed under stress aren't always permanent. When the danger passes, the resonance might fade. And if it doesn't," she met his eyes, seeing her own uncertainty reflected there, "then we figure out what comes next." The shelter seemed smaller now, more intimate, filled with the weight of possibilities neither fully understood. Outside, the abandoned station continued its lonely orbit, but inside, three very different souls were discovering they might not have to face the darkness alone. The storm came without warning. Nix woke to the sound of impact debris striking the station's hull with metallic screams that echoed through the corridors. The shelter's lights flickered as power fluctuations rippled through the aging electrical systems. "What's happening?" Vera asked, sitting up on her cot with alarm evident in her rapidly pulsing markings. Jace was already at the control panel, fingers dancing over the readouts. "Asteroid storm, probably stirred up by a passing freighter's wake." He frowned at the displays. "It's a big one. We're going to be stuck here for at least another day. Maybe two." The shelter shuddered as another piece of debris found its mark. Emergency lighting activated, bathing everything in red, and Nix felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the fear response that had never quite left her since their evacuation from Zephyria. "The hull integrity?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Holding, but I need to check the outer sections. Make sure nothing vital got damaged." Jace pulled on his patched thermal vest and headed for the exit. "Stay here. I'll be back in an hour." "I'll come with you," Nix said, rising from her cot. "Mother, no." Vera protested. "You're still weak from yesterday." "I'm fine." It wasn't entirely true. The stress of their capture and escape had taken more out of her than she'd admitted, but she couldn't stand the thought of waiting helplessly while Jace risked himself for their safety. He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. "Stay close," he said finally. "Some of these outer sections haven't been pressurized in years." They made their way through the station's corridors together, emergency lighting casting their shadows in stark relief against the metal walls. The sounds of the storm were more pronounced here, a constant drumbeat of impacts that spoke of the vast debris field surrounding them. "How often does this happen?" Nix asked, following Jace's lead as he navigated through a section where the overhead panels had partially collapsed. "Often enough that I've learned to read the signs. Usually get a few hours warning, but this one came out of nowhere." He paused at an intersection, checking his scanner for atmospheric readings. Must have been triggered by something bigger than usual. They reached an observation deck that offered a view of the storm's fury. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Nix could see chunks of rock and metal spinning through space like deadly snowflakes. Some were no larger than her fist, but others were the size of shuttlecraft, massive enough to punch through the station's hull if they hit with enough force. "It's beautiful," she murmured, despite the danger. Jace glanced at her in surprise. "Beautiful, terrifying, but beautiful, like watching a star being born." She placed her hand against the window, feeling the vibrations of impact transmitted through the hull. "On Zephyria, we had crystal storms. The mineral formations in our atmosphere would create light displays during electrical disturbances. The entire sky would dance with color. I'd like to have seen that." There was something wistful in his voice that made Nix look at him more closely. In the red emergency lighting, his face was all shadows and hard angles, but his eyes held the same longing she'd noticed before. "What about Earth?" she asked. "What was it like?" "I never lived on Earth. Born on a colony ship, raised on a dozen different worlds." He turned away from the window. "Never had a real home. Maybe that's why I stayed here when everyone else left. This is home now. It's the closest I've ever come." The confession hung between them as another impact shook the station. When the vibrations faded, Nix found herself standing closer to him than she'd intended, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "We should check the atmospheric processors," he said quietly, but he didn't move away. "Yes," she agreed, but she didn't move either. Her markings were pulsing slowly, responding to his proximity with waves of soft blue light that seemed to fascinate him. When he raised his hand tentatively toward her cheek, she didn't pull away. "Does it hurt when they do that?" he asked, his fingers hovering just above her skin. "No, it feels," she searched for the right word in standard, "warm, like sunlight." His fingertips brushed against the luminescent tracery along her temple, and the patterns flared brighter in response. The sensation was electric, sending warmth racing through her nervous system in ways she hadn't felt in years. "Incredible," he breathed. "Jace, I know this is complicated." His hand was still cupping her cheek, thumb tracing the delicate patterns that pulsed beneath her skin. "But I haven't felt alive in so long, and you, both of you make me remember what it's like to want something more than just survival." Before she could respond, the station shuddered again, more violently this time. Alarms began blaring, and Jace's scanner erupted in warning signals. "Hull breach in Section A," he said, pulling away reluctantly. "We need to get back to Vera." They ran through corridors filled with emergency warnings, the sounds of their footsteps echoing off metal walls as the storm raged around them. When they reached the shelter, they found Vera huddled on her cot, her markings pulsing rapidly with fear. "The whole station shaking," she said, relief evident in her voice as they entered. "I thought something had happened to you." "We're fine," Nix assured her, settling beside her daughter and pulling her close. "But there's been a hull breach. We may need to move deeper." Into the station, Jace was busy at the control panel, rerouting power and sealing off the damaged sections. "Emergency bulkheads are holding, but we've lost atmosphere in the outer ring. Good thing we weren't planning to go back to the medical bay tonight." "How long will this last?" Vera asked. "Storm should pass by tomorrow evening. Then we'll assess the damage and see about getting those supplies." Another impact shook the shelter, and the lights flickered ominously in the brief darkness that followed. Nix felt Vera's hand slip into hers while her other hand found Jace's arm. When the lights returned, she realized he had moved closer to them, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I'm sorry," he said, starting to pull away. "I didn't mean to, don't." Vera's voice was quiet but firm. "Please, it feels safer this way." They arranged themselves on the narrow cots, Vera in the middle with Nix on one side and Jace on the other. It should have been awkward, three beings from different worlds, thrown together by circumstance, but instead it felt natural, necessary. "Tell us about the colonies," Vera said softly, her head resting on Jace's shoulder. "The ones you saw before the war." Jace was quiet for a moment, his arm tightening protectively around her. "There was a world called Heaven's Rest, agricultural colony, mostly. Rolling green fields as far as you could see, with a sun that set orange every night. The people there, they'd never known war, never known fear. They'd built something beautiful. What happened to it? Corporate dispute over water rights. The colony got caught in the middle. His voice was barely above a whisper. There's nothing left now but glass and ash. Nix felt his pain as if it were her own, her markings responding to his grief with gentle pulses of compassion. We built cities that sang, she said, offering her own memory in return. The crystal formations on Zephyria would resonate with the wind, creating music that could be heard for kilometers. Every dawn brought a new symphony. I would have liked to hear that, Jace murmured. Maybe someday you will, if we find a new world. We can try to recreate them. You'd want me there. The question held so much hope and fear that Nix felt her heart clench. She looked across Vera's sleeping form to meet his eyes in the dim light. I think, she said carefully, that you've already become part of our song. His hand found hers, across their shared space, fingers intertwining with a gentleness that spoke of reverence rather than possession. Her markings pulsed brighter, and she saw similar patterns beginning to appear on Vera's skin, their daughter's subconscious mind, responding to the emotional resonance building. Between all three of them, this bond you mentioned, Jace said. How does it work exactly? It's different for everyone. Some bonds are platonic, deep friendship, family connections. Others are romantic, usually between two people. Sometimes 3 or 4 if the resonance is strong enough. Nix felt heat rise in her cheeks again. The patterns are responding to genuine care, to the possibility of love, and you're both responding to you, yes. The admission felt dangerous and liberating at the same time, but we're also responding to each other in new ways. Vera and I have always had a mother-daughter bond, but this is something deeper, more complex. I don't want to come between you. You're not. Vera's voice was drowsy but certain. You're completing something, making us whole. The storm raged on outside, but inside their small shelter, wrapped in each other's warmth, the three of them found a peace none had known in years. When Nix finally drifted off to sleep, her last conscious thought was of how right this felt, how the broken pieces of their lives were somehow fitting together into something beautiful and new. In her dreams, she heard the crystal cities singing again, but now their melody was harmonized with sounds she'd never heard before, human laughter and alien comfort blending into a song of hope that echoed across the stars. Morning came with silence. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the station floating peacefully in space once more. Nix woke slowly, awareness returning in layers, the warmth of bodies on either side of her, the gentle hum of life support systems, the soft glow of her own bioluminescent markings reflecting off the curved walls. She was lying between Jace and Vera, her daughter's head resting on her shoulder while Jace's arm encircled them both. Their breathing was synchronized, she realized, and their bioluminescent patterns were pulsing in perfect harmony. The bond had deepened during the night, becoming something more profound than mere attraction or companionship. Vera stirred first, her markings brightening as consciousness returned. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice soft with contentment. "Good morning, darling." Nix brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead, marveling at how healthy she looked. The fever was completely gone, and her markings showed none of the dimness that had worried Nix before. Jace's eyes opened more slowly, focusing first on Nix's face with an expression of wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. "The storm's over," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Yes." Nix made no move to extract herself from their tangled embrace. "How do you feel? Different? Like I've been sleeping for years and just woke up." He sat up carefully, running a hand through his dark hair. "The resonance thing, is it always this intense?" "Not always," Vera said, stretching languidly. "But when it's right, when it's meant to be," she trailed off, color rising in her cheeks. "It's meant to be?" Jace asked softly. Nix met his eyes, seeing her own certainty reflected there. "I think it might be." They moved around the small shelter with new awareness of each other, sharing tasks and space with an intimacy that felt both natural and charged with possibility. Jace prepared breakfast while Vera checked their equipment, and Nix found herself watching both of them with a mixture of tenderness and desire that was entirely new to her experience. "The medical bay," she said eventually, "Can we try again today?" Jace nodded, his expression becoming more serious. The hull breach damaged some of the outer sections, but the medical bay should still be accessible, and the security system will have reset after yesterday's events. "What about the storage unit?" "I've been thinking about that." He pulled out his modified scanner, checking its readings. There might be a way to access it directly, bypass the main security entirely, but it would require someone small enough to fit through the maintenance tunnels. Vera looked up from the equipment she was sorting. "How small? About your size?" Nyx felt her protective instincts flare. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous, Mother. I can handle—" "No." The word came out sharper than Nyx intended. "I won't risk losing you." "You won't lose me." Vera's voice was calm, patient. "But our people are dying. If there's a way to get those medicines—" "She's right," Jace said quietly, "and I'll be with her every step of the way. The tunnels are stable, and I know the layout." Nyx looked between them, seeing the determination in both their faces. It was the same resolve that had driven her to risk this mission. In the first place, she realized, the same willingness to sacrifice for the greater good that defined her people's best qualities. "Together," she said finally. "All three of us, we don't separate." Relief flooded both their faces, and Nyx felt their markings pulse in synchronization with her own gratitude and love, and the promise of shared purpose. They made their way through the station's corridors with renewed purpose, navigating around the debris from the storm damage. The medical bay was intact, though several panels had been shaken loose from the walls. The pharmaceutical storage unit stood unchanged, its sealed chamber still containing the treasures they desperately needed. "The maintenance access is here," Jace said, indicating a panel near the floor. "It leads directly to the storage unit's power coupling. If we can bypass the authorization protocols from inside the system—" "I understand." Vera knelt beside the access panel, her slender form easily fitting through the opening. "Nyx, I'll need you to monitor the security readouts. Jace, guide me through the coupling procedures." Working together, they began the delicate process of circumventing the storage unit's defenses. Vera's voice came through the comm system as she navigated the narrow spaces behind the walls, while Jace provided technical guidance and Nyx watched for any signs of security activation. "I can see the power coupling," Vera reported. "There are 3 connectors, just like you described. Disconnect the middle one first," Jace instructed. "That should disable the automated locks." Nyx watched the security readouts, her heart racing as various systems flickered and went dark. "It's working. Authorization protocols are offline. Now, the storage unit itself," Jace said, moving to the main control panel. "Vera, reconnect that middle coupling, but leave the others disconnected. That should give us manual access." The storage unit's lights came back on, but this time there were no warnings, no countdowns to sterilization. The transparent aluminum window showed the precious medical supplies inside, waiting to be claimed. "We did it," Vera breathed, emerging from the maintenance tunnel with dust in her hair and triumph in her eyes. "We did it," Nyx agreed, pulling her daughter into a fierce embrace. Over Vera's shoulder, she met Jace's eyes and saw the same joy she felt not just at their success, but at what they had accomplished together. The extraction took several hours. They packed the medical supplies carefully, ensuring nothing was damaged in transport. Anti-radiation drugs, cellular regenerators, pain suppressors, antibiotics, everything they needed to treat their people's illness, and more besides. "This will save thousands of lives," Nyx said, cradling a vial of regeneration serum like it was made of precious crystal. "Your people's lives." Jace corrected softly. "Our people," Vera said firmly, looking between them. "If you want them to be." The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility and fear. Nyx realized this was the moment of choice, the point where they decided whether what had grown between them was real enough to build a future on. "I want that," Jace said quietly. "More than I've wanted anything in years. But I don't know if your people will accept me, a human, after everything that's happened." "They'll accept you because we do," Nyx said with certainty. "Because you've proven yourself worthy of trust. Because you've chosen love over fear. And because," Vera added with a smile that made her markings dance with light, "you're part of our song now. They'll hear it in our resonance. See it in our patterns. They'll know you belong with us." That evening, as they prepared for the journey back to Vera's ship, they found themselves tangled together on the narrow cots once more. But this time, the touches were intentional, deliberate, charged with the knowledge of what they meant to each other. Jace's hands were gentle as they traced the luminescent patterns on Nyx's skin, his touch sending waves of pleasure through her nervous system. Her own fingers explored the planes of his chest, mapping scars and finding sensitive spots that made him gasp with delight. Vera moved between them with fluid grace, her lips finding first her mother's, then Jace's, sharing kisses that tasted of hope and desire and the promise of forever. When Nyx's mouth met Jace's over their daughter's shoulder, the kiss was deep and hungry, full of years of loneliness finally finding its end. They made love with a tenderness that spoke of reverence for the miracle they had found in each other. Three broken souls, refugees from different kinds of war, discovering that healing was possible when it was shared. Their bodies moved together in harmony, creating new patterns of light and sensation that none had experienced alone. Later, as they lay entwined in the afterglow, their bioluminescent markings pulsing in perfect synchronization, Nyx realized that for the first time since leaving Zephyria, she felt truly at home. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice soft in the darkness. "Now we go to your people," Jace said, his arms tightening around both women. "We deliver the medicine. We start building something new." "Together," Vera murmured against his shoulder. "Together," they agreed, and the word became a promise that echoed in the patterns of light dancing across their skin. Outside, the stars wheeled in their ancient courses, but inside their small shelter, three hearts beat as one, creating a future that none could have imagined alone. 6 months later, the makeshift city of New Zephyria sprawled across the surface of an unnamed moon in the outer rim, its crystalline structures catching and reflecting the light of twin suns. The architecture was a blend of traditional Zephyrian design and human engineering, creating something entirely new. Buildings that sang in the wind, while standing strong against the harsh realities of frontier life. Nyx stood on the observation deck of their home, watching construction crews work on the new medical center. The radiation sickness that had plagued her people was now a memory, conquered by the medicines they had retrieved from the Kepler station and Jace's knowledge of human medical technology. Children played in the streets below, their bioluminescent markings bright with health and happiness. "The hydroponics bay is showing exceptional yields," Vera's voice came from behind her, warm with satisfaction. "Jace's modifications to the soil composition have increased our food production by 30%. Nyx turned to find her daughter, approaching with a tablet full of reports, her administrative robes flowing around her as she moved. At 19, Vera had grown into her role as liaison between their people and the growing number of human refugees who had joined their community. Her markings showed the complex patterns of someone who had found her calling in helping others, and the new arrivals, 17 more families this week. Word is spreading that New Zephyria accepts anyone willing to work for the common good. Vera smiled, settling beside her mother at the observation window. Jace is down there now, helping them find housing. Nyx could see him in the street below, his tall form unmistakable even at this distance. He was carrying a human child on his shoulders while directing a group of new colonists toward the residential district. His integration committee badge caught the sunlight, marking him as one of the community's elected leaders. "He's happy," Vera observed, following her mother's gaze. "We all are." It was true. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of construction and organization, of learning to blend two very different cultures into something that worked for everyone. There had been challenges: some humans who couldn't accept alien leadership, some Zephyrians who remained suspicious of human motives, but those had been outnumbered by the success stories. "The council meeting is in an hour," Vera reminded her. "The vote on the new agricultural zones." "I'll be there." Nyx touched her daughter's cheek, marveling at how the younger woman had blossomed in their new environment. "You've done wonderful work with the integration protocols. I had good teachers." Vera's markings pulsed with affection. "Both of you." The sound of footsteps on the stairs announced Jace's arrival. and Nyx felt her own bioluminescent patterns brighten in response to his presence. The bond between them had only deepened over the months, becoming something that strengthened rather than complicated their individual relationships. "How did the orientation go?" Nyx asked as he joined them at the window. "Better than expected. The new families seemed genuinely committed to building something together." He slipped his arms around both women, and Nyx felt the familiar warmth of their connection settle into place. "One of the human engineers has ideas for improving our power grid efficiency, and the Zephyrian children, fascinated by human technology. I think we're going to have a generation that's equally comfortable with bioluminescent art and quantum mechanics." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their city grow. New Zephyria wasn't just a refuge anymore, it was becoming something unique in the galaxy. A place where different species worked together as equals, where the scars of war were healing into something beautiful. "The medical center will be ready for dedication next month," Vera said eventually. "The council wants to name it after you, Jace." "That's not necessary." "It is," Nyx interrupted gently. "You saved our people, not just with the medicines, but with your vision of what we could become together." "We saved each other," he corrected, his voice soft with emotion. "I was dying inside that station. Even if my body was still breathing, you'd have brought me back to life." Vera leaned into his side, her head resting on his shoulder. "Speaking of life, there's something I need to tell you both." Nyx turned to face her daughter fully, noting the particular pattern of her markings, a rhythm she hadn't seen in years, not since. "Vera, I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them, carrying implications that went far beyond personal joy. Zephyrian human hybrids were theoretically possible, but there had never been a recorded case of successful reproduction between their species. "Are you certain?" Jace asked, his voice carefully controlled. "The medical scanners confirmed it this morning. Dr. Kesh says all indicators are positive." Vera's markings were pulsing with a complex mixture of joy, fear, and wonder. The baby is healthy," Vera continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Hybrid genetics are stabilizing normally. Dr. Kesh thinks the bioluminescent patterns will be fully functional, but with human cognitive development patterns." NYX felt her legs weaken, and Jace's steady presence beside her was the only thing keeping her upright. A grandchild, the first of a new generation that would be truly native to this world, this community they were building together. "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Terrified, excited, complete." Vera's hand moved instinctively to her still flat abdomen. "This child will never know the pain of losing a home world. They'll grow up thinking it's normal for different species to live together, to love together." Jace was staring at Vera with an expression of wonder that made Nyx's heart clench with love. "You're sure you want this, with everything that might come with raising a hybrid child?" "I'm sure." Vera reached for both their hands, drawing them into the familiar circle of connection that had sustained them through so much. "This baby was conceived in love, will be born into a community that celebrates diversity. What more could any child need?" Nyx felt tears, a human expression she'd adopted, gathering in her eyes. "Your father would have been so proud." "He is proud," Vera said softly. "I can feel it sometimes in the resonance patterns. Our ancestors' love doesn't disappear just because they're gone. It becomes part of who we are, part of what we pass on." The three of them held each other as the twin suns set beyond New Zephyr's crystalline spires, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that reminded Nyx of her lost homeworld, while promising something entirely new. That night, in the bedroom they had designed together, large enough for three, with windows positioned to catch both sunrise and sunset, they celebrated the news with a tenderness that spoke of years rather than months together. Their lovemaking was slow, reverent, touched with the awe of creating not just pleasure but legacy. Jace's hands were gentle on Vera's body, mindful of the precious life growing within her, while Nyx kissed them both with a passion that had only deepened with time. Their bioluminescent patterns painted the walls with shifting constellations of light, creating a display that was uniquely theirs, a visual representation of love that transcended species boundaries. "I used to dream about this," Nyx murmured against Jace's shoulder as they lay entwined afterward. "Not the specifics, but the feeling. Being part of something larger than survival. What did you dream? Vera asked sleepily, her head pillowed on her mother's chest. I dreamed that someday our people would sing again, that we'd build cities that made music with the wind, raise children who knew what it meant to be safe. Nix's fingers traced patterns on both their skin. I never imagined it would feel like this complete. The baby will need names, Jace said thoughtfully, both Zephyrian and human traditions. Names can wait, Vera said with a smile in her voice. First, we need to tell the council. This changes everything, proves that our communities can literally create a future together, not just create, Nix corrected, thrive. Over the following weeks, word of Vera's pregnancy spread through News Ephria like ripples in still water. The news was met with celebration. From most quarters, spontaneous festivals appeared in the streets. Children created elaborate bioluminescent art displays, and the human engineers began designing modifications to the nursery facilities. But there were also challenges. A small faction of traditionalists, both human and Zephyrian, raised concerns about genetic integrity and cultural preservation. Town meetings became heated debates about the future direction of their society. Change is always frightening, Elder Korath said during one particularly intense council session. Her ancient markings pulsed with the slow rhythms of centuries-old wisdom. But this child represents hope, not threat. They will be the bridge between our people's futures. What if the hybrid genetics cause problems? Demanded Counselor Reeves, one of the human representatives. What if we're creating children who belong to neither species fully? Then we'll be creating children who belong to both species completely. Jace replied calmly, who see unity where we see division. Nix stood to address the assembly, her administrative robes marking her as one of New Zephyria's founding leaders. 6 months ago, we were 3 broken people hiding in an abandoned space station. Today, we're part of a thriving community of over 4,000 souls. Change isn't just possible, it's inevitable. The question is whether we guide it with wisdom or let fear control our choices. The vote, when it came, was overwhelmingly in favor of supporting hybrid families and establishing New Zephyria as a sanctuary for interspecies relationships. The few dissenters were offered relocation assistance to communities more aligned with their views, but most chose to stay and adapt. 3 months later, Vera was showing clearly, her pregnancy announcing itself in the enhanced brightness of her bioluminescent patterns. The baby was growing normally, showing all the expected developmental markers while displaying unique characteristics that fascinated the medical staff. The neural pathways are forming in patterns we've never seen before, Dr. Kesh explained during one of their regular checkups. Enhanced connectivity between the regions that govern both logical reasoning and intuitive perception. This child may have cognitive abilities that surpass both parent species, as long as they're healthy, Vera said, her hand resting protectively on her rounded belly. More than healthy, exceptional. That evening, as they prepared for sleep in their shared bed, Nix felt the baby move for the first time. The tiny flutter against her palm, as she rested her hand on Vera's stomach, was like touching the future itself. Strong, she murmured with satisfaction. Stubborn, more like. Vera laughed. They've been keeping me awake with their gymnastics. Jace pressed his ear to Vera's belly, listening intently. I think they're responding to our voices. Look at Vera's markings. Indeed, the luminescent patterns on Vera's skin were pulsing in rhythm with their conversation, and occasionally a brighter flash would appear directly over where the baby was moving. Already learning the resonance patterns, Nix said with wonder. They'll be born understanding both our languages, spoken and luminescent. All 3 languages. Jace corrected. They'll speak human standard, Zephyrian melodic, and whatever new form of communication emerges from growing up truly bilingual. As spring turned toward summer on their adopted world, Vera's pregnancy progressed smoothly. The baby's father was never explicitly discussed. The nights they had shared were so intertwined that biological paternity seemed irrelevant compared to the emotional reality of their 3-way bond. This child would have 3 parents in every way that mattered. The nursery they prepared was a masterpiece of cultural integration. Zephyrian crystal formations hung from the ceiling, designed to respond to the baby's eventual bioluminescent patterns with harmonious light displays. Human. Technology provided climate control, medical monitoring, and educational interfaces. The walls were painted with murals that told the story of both species' histories. While looking forward to a shared future, "It's perfect," Vera said. Standing in the doorway as her due date approached, her pregnancy had been transformative in more ways than physical. She had grown into a leader whose vision of interspecies cooperation inspired everyone around her. "Almost perfect," Nyx corrected, adding the final touch: a mobile made from fragments of crystal from old Zephyria, metal from Jace's former ship, and new materials mined from their adopted world. Now it's perfect. When labor began, it was during one of New Zephyria's famous sunset light shows. The twin suns were setting in perfect alignment, casting the city's crystal spires into brilliant relief, while the aurora-like phenomenon that occurred monthly painted the sky in streams of color. "Appropriate timing," Jace murmured, supporting Vera as they made their way to the medical center that bore his name. The birth was attended by the best medical minds from both species, with Dr. Kesh leading a team that had spent months preparing for this moment. Nyx held Vera's hand while Jace monitored the readings, all three of them connected by the bioluminescent resonance that had become their family's signature. When their daughter finally arrived, perfect, healthy, her skin showing the faint tracery of bioluminescent potential, even as her very human lungs announced her presence to the world, the entire city seemed to hold its breath. "She's beautiful," Vera whispered, cradling the tiny form against her chest. The baby's eyes, when they opened, were Jace's deep brown flecked with gold, but they seemed to focus with an awareness that was purely her own. When Nyx touched the infant's cheek, microscopic patterns of light flickered beneath the surface, the first signs of developing bioluminescent capability. "What will we call her?" Jace asked softly. "Lystra," Vera said without hesitation. "It means new song in Old Zephyrian, because she's the beginning of something we've never heard before. Lystra Chenal Daramorison," Nyx added, giving the child names from all their traditions. "Our new song." The baby gurgled contentedly, her tiny fist wrapping around her grandfather's finger with surprising strength. In that moment, holding their daughter while surrounded by the love of her chosen family, Nyx felt the last of her old grief finally transform into hope.